Greetings. My name is Jeff Matrenga. I am a psychologist, and I am here in this video to help provide background information about mindfulness meditation, including what it is, what it isn't, some of the research findings that have accumulated about the benefits of practice, and then some information about how you can further cultivate and consolidate your practice. First, I'd like to say that I think mindfulness meditation and other forms of meditation, I view them as a gift that we give ourselves. In the beginning, it takes little or no money to learn the skills, and then it's just a matter of practice. It's normal to fall off the wagon and get back on. But as we practice the skills, we are that much more able to weather the storms that come along in life, to deal with the ups and downs, maybe eventually deal with a difficult diagnosis, a medical issue, and to deal with loss, different kinds of losses of loved ones, of loved pets, and also loss of our own functioning as we age. I am going to shift right now to sharing my screen in order to start going through some of this information. So hopefully right now you are seeing the screen. And let me shift into this mode. All right. So the picture you see here, by the way, as it says, that was taken in the fields, the snowmobile trails that dump into the Quarry Road recreation area. Along those lines of this being a gift that we give ourselves, this is a quote from Jon Kabat-Zinn, who is one of the people that did a lot to bring this set of skills to the US and to the West. Every time I formally take my seat on my meditation cushion, it's a radical act of love. It's a radical act of sanity. And it's also a radical act of self-compassion because, you know, it's like giving myself a break. It's not about how much I get done in the next 10 minutes or 24 hours. It's about now. It's always about this timeless moment. And I really do feel that that is a love affair with life and with the preciousness of our moments. So just a little background context on how I got into this area. As I said before, I'm a psychologist. I specialize in an area called health psychology, which deals with the interaction of health and behavior and emotions. And I also work a lot with anxiety and depression that's not part of a health issue. I'm about 80% retired at this point. As a psychologist, roughly 15 years ago, I was aware of accumulating research, including some good research, indicating that mindfulness meditation has a lot of benefits. I've been in this field long enough to see lots of fads come and go, but I was aware that there was some good research out there about the benefits. And then I had a couple of clients. The first one, basically, I think we were working on his anxiety disorder. And then he asked me if adding meditation would help. At that point, I knew enough to teach him some basics. And it was phenomenal to watch his progress accelerate as he added meditation to what we were doing. And then this happened with another client, and that made me get more serious about my own practice, which had been intermittent. And I moved that to daily in the autumn of 2011. I was sort of surrounded by forces telling me to get regular with the skill. Another force was that my wife, Jerry Wilson, she was and is a yoga teacher. She co-founded Schools for Yoga. And as she further consolidated her own yoga practice that was including meditation as well. Also in my life, I experienced a lot of deaths from around 2009 to 2015. And then my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2015. And all this sort of heightened my awareness about impermanence and mortality and loss of functioning. And with that, I started looking at getting a meditation group going. And it took a little while, but I found my way to Nancy Hathaway, a very seasoned, excellent teacher. And we started this at School Street Yoga in 2012 with an initial 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction course. And then a core of us from that kept going with a weekly meditation group. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So there are a lot of little pieces there, and John Kabat-Zinn, I think, was very deliberate in how he worded this. So we're paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Put another way, this means that maintaining a non-judgmental moment by moment awareness of and acceptance of our thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, and surrounding environment. What it isn't, it is not a religion. I mean, a lot of this was distilled, I guess, from Buddhism, but it's not Buddhism. And it may go well with one's own religion, and it shouldn't conflict with it. There's a nice story about Thich Nhat Hanh and a Jewish person. He had just finished a retreat with him, and this person says something like, I'm going to go back and tell my rabbi that this has made me a better Jew. By itself, it is not psychotherapy, though it may be a powerful adjunct to therapy. There are forms of this training, such as mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, that are designed to be psychotherapeutic. So it has therapeutic elements. It shouldn't be confused with psychotherapy, which may be more targeted for certain problems, but it can be a wonderful adjunct. I half jokingly tell my newer clients, and I have done this for years, that, gee, for this particular problem, whatever it is, let's say panic disorder, the treatment with the best evidence is a form of cognitive behavioral therapy that focuses on X, Y, and Z. And we talk about that, and then I'll often add, and if you cultivate a meditation practice, you're going to be able to fire me more quickly, or at least partially lay me off. So with practice, there are two basic types of practice that we do, and they feed each other. So one is the formal practice, and that's what happens when we're sitting on the cushion or in a chair. It doesn't have to be on a cushion, and it doesn't have to be cross-legged on the floor. But when we're focusing for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes on the process, that's what we call our formal practice. That might also include movement meditation, walking meditation. And then there's informal practice, and that's when we are working at generalizing this moment-to-moment, here and now awareness when we're not formally practicing. So, for example, when I'm washing the dishes, to be fully present with washing the dishes. And when my mind wanders, which is normal, to gently, non-judgmentally bring it back to the task at hand. Or when I'm having a conversation with someone and listening to them, that I'm truly listening to them. And when my mind wanders, thinking about that next thing I need to do, to notice that and come back to right here, right now. So that's the informal practice. So what do we know? Oh, this graph shows the explosion in research starting especially around 2005. These are publications on mindfulness, and it just took off. I don't know what it looks like in the last few years. All right, very basically, physiologically, we know that when people meditate, generally there's a decrease in heart rate, blood pressure, cortisol levels, a stress hormone, uh, decreased breathing or respiration rate, lowered oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, decreased skin conductance, which is another um, psychophysiological parameter that is an index of stress, and decreased muscle tension. The book that's listed at the bottom there is a good book if you want to dive into the research behind this. After there was so much hype and excitement about meditation, there also came uh, some bad research that went too far in claiming what meditation could do. And that's what happens in research when someone oversells something. There's going to be a backlash later, and sometimes we throw out the baby with the bathwater. So Goleman, who was a fellow graduate student with Davidson at Harvard in the early 70s, Goleman later went on to become, I think, the science editor for the New York Times for a number of years. But they decided to write a book focusing on the solid research and what are the findings that we can have some amount of trust in. So this focuses on those kinds of findings. So, and they break it down into stages. So the first part they call early. So when people are first starting to practice within hours, days, and weeks, we see less amygdala reactivity to stress. And the amygdala, as you may know, is a part of the brain that does a few things, but one of them is it deals with fear, anxiety, stress. And then the amygdala shows signs of lowered reactivity. In addition, people show improved attention, better focus with less mind wandering. Zero mind wandering is not the goal, and it's not, as far as we know, it's not possible. Our minds are designed to wander to some extent, but we can have less mind wandering, and people experience that as they practice. With compassion meditation early on, there seems to be increased connections in the circuitry in the brain that's involved in being helpful or being empathic towards others. Also, markers for inflammation lessen a bit, and that improves further with more practice. So longer term meditators, for example, those with maybe 1,000 hours of practice or more, the research shows further decreases in physiological reactivity to stress seen in the brain, in various hormones, and also decreased inflammation. There tends to be a strengthening of circuits in the prefrontal area of the brain, circuits that are helpful for managing distress. There are also further improvements in attention. So for those who have been practicing a long time, like more than 20, you're an average of 27 hours, 27,000 hours, that would be like Buddhist monks, people like that. What is seen is large gamma waves or gamma oscillations in the brain that um, people who don't meditate show little bits of here and there, but these really long-term meditators show a lot of it. And it seems to correspond with a synchronization of um, far-flung brain regions. And these changes are apparent even when the people are not meditating. These long-term meditators can usually stop and start meditative states that are measurable within seconds. They have a decreased pain reaction, and usually what is found with pain, physical pain, is that long-term meditators are that much more sensitive to pain, but they have much less distress, emotional distress as an extra layer going with that pain reaction. Also, when the pain stops, they show a much quicker return to a normal state in the brain, much quicker than people that don't meditate. With compassion meditation, again, there seems to be a high level of synchrony in various parts of the brain. So there are a lot of benefits to meditation for general wellness, and that's basically what we've been talking about so far. What about when we use mindfulness meditation, that's MM, or as an adjunct, let's say with clinical problems like depression and anxiety? Well, it can be a powerful adjunct. There's some evidence that it reduces relapse rates for people with chronic intermittent depression. It may not be the first line treatment for a number of conditions, but again, it may be a helpful supplement. With anxiety work, it, basically with successful treatments for anxiety, it involves some form of exposure. Like classically, if someone's afraid of heights, we're going to gradually work up to having them stand near the edge of a precipice. And we gradually work up to that. But sometimes exposure work is too intense for a given individual. And sometimes meditation can help them get to a point where they can participate in that kind of treatment, or at least that point there comes more from my own experience. When we do meditate, we are inserting a pause between stimulus and response. So instead of our normal reactive selves, we gradually learn to step back from our automatic reaction and perhaps choose a more skillful response. Okay, so meditation orientation. The default mode of the brain it includes mind wandering. Again, zero mind wandering is not the goal, and it's probably not possible. I think even these monks who have been meditating for decades, many hours a week, I think they will even say their mind still wanders, but probably a lot less than the average person. So if your mind still wanders when you're practicing, that's okay. It's not the wandering that is the problem. It's how we work with it that's therapeutic. It's the process of that. As you get into mindfulness meditation, sometimes people get the impression that thinking is bad, and that's not true. The kind of thinking that we do to be able to analyze something, and that involves a lot of the prefrontal cortex, that kind of thinking is a gift, and it has provided our cultures with so much that we wouldn't have otherwise. The problem is that we tend to overthink things or apply thinking when it's not productive. So on a personal level, maybe we worry about the future when worrying isn't doing anything for us, or we ruminate about the past when that rumination isn't actually productive. It doesn't go anywhere. We do mental time travel, as they sometimes say. So in that sense, cognitive processing can interfere with emotional processing. And we could talk a lot more about that, but I think that goes beyond this video. It's important to know that when thoughts do come up, when we're meditating, we're not pushing them away, and we're not pushing away uncomfortable feelings. We acknowledge that they are there and then return to a sensory here and now anchor like our breath. So if I'm sort of observing my breath, if that's my anchor for meditation, and I notice sadness, I'm not going to push the sadness away. I'm going to acknowledge it. Oh, sadness. And I might even say, thank you for that awareness, and back to my breath. When we push away uncomfortable feelings or thoughts, um, the joke is that they go to the basement to lift weights and then come back a little bit stronger. And in my practice as a psychologist, I think that's true. I believe that. Whereas if we acknowledge feeling sad, jealous, angry, whatever it is, um, that alone helps to diffuse the difficult emotion. And then there are other things that we can do. Sometimes I explain this in this way that distress wants to be acknowledged or quote unquote heard, not necessarily acted upon, but it's as if there's a little voice in our head that says, hey, are you paying attention to this distress? And if we say, yes, I see this, I feel it, sadness, um, then that voice doesn't need to knock as intensely on that door. Okay. So some meditation resources. As you get going, if you do have access to a group, or you can form a group of friends or something to meditate once a week, that will reinforce what you do the rest of the week. Another thing you can do is log your practice, but don't be intense or full of shoulds about it. I encourage people to frame their goals, not just for meditation, but for other wellness habits we're trying to cultivate, to frame them in a self-compassionate, batting average kind of way. So instead of I'm going to meditate every day from here on out, maybe something like, let's see how many days out of 7 I can meditate for at least 3 minutes. When you're starting, 10 minutes is a good goal, but if you feel like you're too busy that day, ask yourself, do I really not have 3 minutes? And if you feel real busy, do 3 minutes and count it as a yes. That will keep the pump primed. Much better than an all or nothing kind of approach. There are a number of apps out there that are good. Two that I frequently recommend to people are Headspace and 10% Happier. I think they're both good. They have a little different approach. There are other ones out there. I haven't sampled them all by any means. When you're getting going, use guided meditations. And one resource for that is if you go on the website for Health Psych Maine, the psychology practice in Waterville, which was a practice that I started and ran for about 20 years. Good folks there, by the way. There is a tab that says meditation resources. And then if you scroll down, there are a couple links to good free guided meditations. So give that a shot. Another app that's out there that my wife and I use every day is called Insight Timer. And I love that app, but I don't necessarily recommend it to beginners because it has become so big. And what I mean is that there are so many guided meditations in there, it's hard to know what's good, and people can get sort of lost. But it's there. And as you move along, you might want to use it to track your practice. Now I've been meditating daily for almost 12 years. And when my meditation gets stale, I go back to guided meditations to sort of, pump some new life into my meditation. And I often go back to ones from people like Joseph Goldstein, and he has several that are on the Insight Meditation app, or Jack Kornfield or Chris Germer. Those are some people I return to. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how to meditate so that the next video we just meditate. I might review some basics though when we get there. So when we meditate, we choose a sensory here and now anchor to come back to. In the beginning, people usually use the breath as an anchor. And when we do that, we're just observing the breath. We're not trying to control it, just observing it. And so what we're doing is we're observing the breath, and probably within seconds, your mind is going to wander, and that's okay. The key is to notice when it has wandered. Oh, that thing that's due next Tuesday. And as soon as you can, it may be seconds, sometimes it's minutes. Notice that you're running off with a train of thought. Thank you. And gently return to observing the breath, non-judgmentally. And then 2 seconds later, when your mind wanders again, that's okay. Thinking about that comment so-and-so made last week. Okay, thank you for that thought. Back to my breath. Other kinds of anchors that people use are ambient sounds. And I tend to do better with sounds, and there are other people like me who work more productively with sounds in the environment rather than the breath. This morning, actually, when I meditated, there was a gentle rain occurring, and that was my anchor, was to keep coming back to the sounds of the rain. Another area that can be helpful is to let internal sensations be your anchor that you keep coming back to. But basically, it's a sensory, not thinking, it's a sensory here and now anchor that we return to. Again, mind wandering is normal and inevitable. Zero mind wandering is not the goal, and it's probably not even possible. And if you think about that adaptively, zero mind wandering would leave us pretty vulnerable and more likely to get run over by a truck or eaten by a predator. So some mind wandering is supposed to be there. But in our culture, we tend to feed that with sort of a fragmented awareness that makes mind wandering much bigger than it needs to be. During meditation, again, your mind wanders. Notice with warmth or loving awareness that it has wandered, and then gently return. It can be helpful to name it, planning, or Tuesday project due, whatever it is. Come back to your here and now anchor, such as observing the breath. Couple seconds later, your mind goes off again. It's okay. Gently return. As the saying goes, if your mind wanders 100 times, lovingly bring it back 101 times. It's the process that is therapeutic. I hope that's helpful to give you some grounding. Feel free to reach out to me with questions as you go. And there should be a second video either up there on the main general site or it's coming soon. Take care and namaste.